It is just a huge honor for me today to be podcast interviewing Dr. Sivakumaran Raman. He goes by Shiv now. He's an MD, MS, is the president and lead health IT consultant at Lumila, a health IT, healthcare analytics, and health software product management consulting service, providing independent healthcare analytics, product management, and health IT consulting services to healthcare organizations, including hospitals, healthcare payers, and private equity firms. Shiv is a physician who has spent most of his career in medical informatics and analytics with the experience of leadership positions at several large U.S. health insurance companies, health systems, and the information technology firms. He has extensive knowledge and expertise on the American healthcare system. His new book, Just Enough Healthcare, is a short primer on the U.S. healthcare system. His previous book was Just Enough R, a freely downloadable primer on R programming language, published on Smashwords and Barnes & Nobles. It is just a huge honor for me to get an MD and an MS to come in and talk numbers, because I have a very strong feeling that, especially when it comes to healthcare and politics and things like that, people just have beliefs. And they just want to believe something, and then some guy like you comes along and shows them all this data, and if it shows them something they don't want to believe, it's stressful. But my first question to you is, this month was my 30-year anniversary of lecturing to dentists around the world. I've lectured in 50 countries, and it just seemed, what I don't understand is healthcare is so more emotional in America than so many other countries. I mean, the bottom line is, like, take Canada, I always read that, like, except for childbirth, like 99% of people don't spend the night in a hospital each year. So 99%, it's no big deal. But man, Americans, they're just so special. Why do you agree that healthcare is more of an emotional thing in America than, say, the next 20 richest countries?
I agree. It is actually a very emotional subject, and it lends itself to politicization as well. And I would consider personal finance and healthcare to be two of the most important things to know as an individual, because these things can affect you on a daily basis. And what I find is personal finance is not that politicized. Most people know how to invest. They don't put their political leanings into it. But when you start evaluating and thinking about healthcare, politics comes into it big time. And that's something I've made sure in my book. I have tried absolutely to give you the facts without taking sides left or right.
Well, you're a pretty accomplished guy. I mean, if you're wondering about this guy's credentials, stop. This guy's going to know more about what he's talking about than any of my homies that are dentists. Well, give a review of Just Enough Healthcare and how you see the market.
Right. So the book seeks to be a primer. A primer in less than 100 pages. Because when I talk to my clients, when I talk to lay people about healthcare, I find emotion, I find a lot of confusion. However, I don't find an understanding that is good enough to make sense of the system. And especially in an election year, healthcare is one of the big topics. And people are going to go and vote one or the other way without really understanding how our existing system works. And if there's something to be changed, how do we change it? Because you've got to understand before you can start to effect change. And I think that is what the book seeks to do, that it's not a long academic text. It's 100 pages. It explains health insurance, healthcare providers, pharmaceutical companies, pharmacy benefit managers, how insurance and how government works, and everything else about the system and its players. And it does it so that you can read through in a single sitting.
Yeah, it's a 100-page read summary, and I love it because it's all numbers. There's so much facts on it. But I wanted to, knowing my crowd, knowing who we're talking about today. Let me see if I can get. I wanted to get what Buffett said. But anyway, Charlie Munger is my favorite investor. You know, him and Warren Buffett. I went to Creighton University in Omaha, Nebraska, and Warren was so sweet back then in the 80s. He actually liked the guy in charge of business at Creighton. Came over there and lectured once. I got to meet the guy. But Charlie Munger is so smart, and he's only made 2 quotes on healthcare, and I want to read them both to you. The quality of the medical care delivered, including the pharmaceutical industry, has improved a lot. I don't think it's crazy for a rich country like the U.S. to spend 15% of GDP on healthcare, and if it rose to 16 to 17%, it's not a big worry. And then he said it, but then he goes on to say, his other quote, I think that if you have a single payer system and an opt-out for people who want to pay more for better service, I think it would be better, and I think we'll eventually get there. It wouldn't be better at the top. Our current system is the best at the world at the top, but the waste in the present system is awesome, and we do get some very perverse incentives. Do you agree with Charlie Munger on those 2 quotes?
I wouldn't want to go so far as to say single payer is the solution, but I would want to lay out both sides, right? The main, what he's right. I mean, I think as a percentage of GDP, healthcare spending in America has gone up to about 18 or even 19%. So it's already past the 15 or 16% he was talking about. That being said, the issue is not that there's so much spending. What are we getting in return for it is, out of all of the OECD countries, I believe America has the worst health indicators in terms of mortality rate, life expectancy, disease rates, cancer rates, all sorts of things, right? So the problem then becomes, why are we spending so much to not get the kind of clinical outcomes that these countries that are spending a fraction of what we are spending are able to achieve? And I think that's and I have thought a lot about this, and I think it boils down to a few things, right? Now, in most modern societies, modern countries, developed countries, healthcare is seen as a right. Now, it's not an inalienable natural right in the words of somebody like John Locke or one of those conservative thinkers, but because it takes money to provide healthcare, and most of the natural rights are pretty much God-given, and that's the assumption. However, since we have decided as a country to say that everybody deserves healthcare, has a right to healthcare, that's when you get into trouble with how do you then make the economic arguments that apply when you're talking about the free market. So if you think about healthcare as just another good or service, just another economic good or service, then you have to apply cold, hard economics to it. But it gets complicated when you're talking about human beings who are thinking that this is a right that they need to get, right? So I think that's where a lot of what Munger's saying in his second quote is, let's provide a basic level of healthcare to everybody. And those who are, seeking more, who are better off, can buy extra. So if you want the latest cancer treatment, you buy a plan which is providing you all those, but then you have some sort of a basic UK-like or Canada-like system that provides basic preventive and basic treatments for everybody with a lot of rationing. Now that's the trade-off. Because there would be a lot of rationing. You would be seeing things like quality adjusted life years. You would be seeing issues with people being denied treatments because it's not covered in their current nationalized or socialized healthcare plan. And so if richer people are able to buy a plan which provides all those treatments, it might be okay, but there could also be resentment. So I would not say that there is a perfect solution because this is economics intertwined with emotions and politics.
Oh my God, it's crazy. and what one of the things about the argument, about all the talk about that it makes me not like the conversation, is because I'm a dentist, and dentists are more likely to own their own business and understand revenue in, revenue out, overhead costs, where a lot of physicians are salaried people in institutions and hospitals, and they've never missed a payroll or stayed up all night worrying about payroll. They're kind of this protected class. But when they always talk about the other countries like Canada, like, well, in Canada, she went and had an operation, she didn't even have a copayment. And I'm like, okay, I'm a dentist, but I have an MBA from Arizona State University. So I'm like, oh, so do you think we should just throw away economics? I mean, from Adam Smith to yesterday, is that just all junk? I mean, how could you not have a copayment? I mean, you clearly see that say a set of a knee replacement was $50,000. And I think everybody should have a 10% copayment just across the board. And you said to Grandpa, hey, Grandpa, you need a new knee. It's $50,000 and your portion's $5,000. And he said, hell with that. I'm just going to take aspirin and I'm not doing that. Okay, he won't pay $5,000, but I'm supposed to pick up the other $45,000 as a taxpayer. And the copayment thing. Okay, so you're in for lung cancer and emphysema because you had $10 a day to buy cigarettes from age 20 to 70, and then they're proud that when he had his $100,000 chemo or $1 million lung transplant, I'm supposed to pay $1 million in taxes for a lung transplant, and this guy won't pick up 10%. I mean, it just seems like with healthcare that the incentives, they have to fall on you because you can affect your health care more than whoever the mayor is. I mean, if you're going to smoke, drink, and eat out of packages and boxes and never eat any healthy food. So when Canadians tell me that they're so proud that there's no co-payments, I just think they're crazy.
Yeah. So, I mean, I wouldn't say they're crazy, but let me tell you what's happening there. So when you subsidize something, you get more of it. If you tax something, you get less of it. That's economics.
Right.
In America, to some extent, healthcare is highly subsidized because half of healthcare is paid for by the government. There's a huge employer-based insurance. Now, there's still people who don't have insurance. There's Medicaid, there's Medicare, but there's still, I guess, a lot of people without insurance. Now, what suffers in all of this when you make something free or almost free is you will get consumption through the roof. So how do countries that have socialized or nationalized healthcare deal with it? They ration care, right? So if you're 85 years of age or 80 years of age in Canada and you want a knee replacement or a hip replacement, you're not going to get it. They will, or in the UK, they'll say, hey, based on your station in life and your age and your health status and everything else, we're going to do some sort of calculation of quality adjusted life years. And we don't think you should be a candidate. If you were 60 years old, maybe we could have thought of a knee replacement for you. So that doesn't happen in America, right? So I think the trade-off is if you have a socialized, nationalized healthcare system, yes, there's no copay, yes, there's no, but you won't get everything. In a non-socialized healthcare system, you will be able to get everything, but it's going to get more, there's going to be more consumption, and personal responsibility to some extent goes for a toss.
Well, in America, I know you're never supposed to talk about religion, sex, politics, violence, but we're trying to be adults here, and I'm just going to be an adult. But in the United States, I mean, you've seen how hard it is to get them to wear a mask. They refer to all quality-adjusted life year as government death panels who are going to decide who will live and who will die. And, because if it bleeds, it leads. And Rupert Murdoch's figured that out around the world, that this type of stuff just sells ads. But the bottom line is where I think we failed Americans is they want all this health care because the Centers for Disease Control and the fragmented healthcare system isn't showing them how many 100,000 plus Americans die each year from going in the hospital. You might say, the quality adjusted life year, there's not the value and we're not going to pay for this on an 89-year-old man. But as a dentist, a doctor who works with my hands on patients, I would worry that an 89-year-old going into a filthy U.S. hospital might be one of the 100,000s that don't come out alive. And I'll have to give you a personal experience that I've seen in my life. You cannot get into Intel. It's very, they don't want espionage and all this stuff. But back in the day, I had a patient there, and he gave me a tour. And I was like amazed where these people, they looked like they were walking on the moon making these fab plants, and the air was circulated to less than 1 part per billion. And then you could leave the Intel plant, go across the street to Chandler Memorial Hospital, pull up in your car with your tennis shoes, walk all the way up to the surgery room. And if you just washed your hands and put on gloves. And I thought, God, Intel making a chip is 1,000 times more sterile than any hospital in America. So the point I'm trying to make is that when you tell people that healthcare and prescription drugs are all free, they want to believe it works, and 100,000 plus Americans die every year from side effects from pharmaceutical pills and in hospitals for things they didn't go in there for. Do you agree with that number, or do some say it's even higher?
Institute of Medicine, I think, put out a report like that about hospital avoidable healthcare events.
Yeah,
and
I mean, who would say give away free candy bars if this certain candy bar killed 100,000 people a year? They would treat it like a illegal substance.
Right. So one of the reasons for overutilization and over-treatment in America is the fee-for-service system, right? Because there's no incentive to keep people healthy. There's actually every incentive on the provider or physician or hospital side to treat people as much as you can. Now, if that involves drugs or visits or treatments or surgeries or procedures, all of that contributes to the top line because that's additional revenue. And that's the way the system has been laid out. So that's one of the reasons why you see medical cost inflation has pretty much outstripped regular consumer price index inflation by 2 to 3 percentage points every single year for the last 20 to 30 years. Because there's no limit to the amount of utilization. And of course, newer therapies and drugs are also more expensive. So there's unit cost inflation for the newer therapies, whether they are better or not. Many times they are, but sometimes they're not, but they're just out there. And secondly, all of the overutilization is all driving the industry in a way. So you're right. I mean, in a perfect world, there should be more preventive care. There should be more holistic medicine. There should be more emphasis on keeping people healthier through diet, exercise, wellness coaching, etc., rather than getting them into the hospital to do a cabbage or a stenting or a knee replacement or whatever else.
And the data is America won. I mean, we're number one. We spend more on healthcare than anyone, and it's because of the incentives, the economic incentives to treat. So we don't have lines. The old joke is that in the old communist days, everybody had money and there was nothing to buy. In America, you have everything in the world to buy and not enough money in capitalism. So there's is there a middle ground, or is it just going to be, runaway cost? And for runaway cost are government-sponsored death panels that tell. I mean, I've seen the data when I lecture around. A lot of dentists like to show me what they see. And when I was in Hong Kong, which I think has an amazing healthcare system, this dentist was showing me all these chemotherapy treatments that actually shorten your life 30 to 60, 90 days while you lose all your hair and throw up and have surgeries and all this stuff like that. Whereas the epidemiologist model at Hong Kong, they said, no, that you have not proven value. We're not going to give you money to have them live a day shorter with vomiting and hair loss and surgeries. I mean, do you see that too in the data?
Yes, some of the treatments are like that. And even if they do extend life by, let's say, 6 months or 2 years, you're spending $3.5 million and the patient is not really enjoying himself or herself or is not productive. So that's true. But then again, when you get into those discussions, what happens is individual rights come to the fore and people say, hey, who are you to deny somebody 2 years of life just because they're vomiting? They might like being close to their grandchildren. So it's always these emotional arguments that come into the picture, I guess. But yes.
What about the emotional rights of my money? I mean, so every Homo sapien since mitochondrial Eve, which you're dating about like at 200,000 years back, every single human has lived and died, and now it's your turn to die, and you're entitled not to free healthcare. You're entitled to my money. I mean, you look at these countries with free healthcare, with no co-payments, and they're all, just like the United States, Japan, they're runaway deficits. I mean, these 20 countries have $40 trillion in debt, so they've taxed their people the most they can with outrage, and then they borrowed on the future, and then they have the nerve to tell me that I have to spend $3.5 million of my money so you can live 2 more years. I mean, life's tough. Life sucks. Life's hard. But it just, it's funny how they're entitled to free stuff, which really means they're entitled to my money. And if I don't pay the IRS, they will send out force to kidnap me and put me in a cage. So I will be kidnapped and in a cage if I don't give you my money. Isn't that a mafia mob shakedown? I mean, shouldn't it be a partnership?
The government is what they call the legitimate use of force, right? Whether you call it by any other name, government is the legitimate use of force. So whether it's to take your money or tax you or whatever else, that's that. But in terms of healthcare, I do think that at some point we are very close to it, truthfully, because right now you have 2 presidential candidates. One has just stopped short of saying Medicare for all. Bernie Sanders' position was Medicare for all. Joe Biden's position is slightly less than that. But on the other side, President Trump is saying that, hey, we want to go back to a different kind of system, which is more driven on personal responsibility and repealing Obamacare. Now, as I said, there's no panacea for all of this, right? There's no one solution. There's going to be people on both sides who are going to be unhappy no matter which system America goes to. The trade-off is, if you are somebody who is generally healthy and you just want to make sure that catastrophic care when you need it is provided for, you in that case are not very happy with the American system, because you're seeing these premiums go through the roof. You're seeing co-pays and deductibles and everything go through the roof. But most of the time you're feeling that you're paying all of this, but you're not really using it. On the other hand, if you're somebody who has an advanced condition, a rare condition, or something that is not, and maybe it's your own fault, right? A lot of diseases that we suffer from nowadays, chronic diseases, heart disease, diabetes, hypertension, they're all lifestyle diseases. They're not all genetic. They're not all environmental. They're lifestyle diseases. So in that case, though, you're kind of happy because you're now one of those overutilizers, and you like it that you don't have to pay for every treatment and so you need a knee replacement, you get it. If you need the latest SGLT2 inhibitor for diabetes, you get it prescribed. If you have something else, so I think that's the trade-off, that yes, the economic argument says this cannot go on forever. The compassionate nationalized healthcare says, hey, we can do it, but we will just ration care so that we will only give it to people who are absolutely going to require it. So that's the trade-off.
And the other, what I think is the worst thing about healthcare systems generally is once they get a treatment, like say renal, what do you call that when you go in dialysis? Mm-hmm. And you take any one of those subjects, you just take about all the money spent on dialysis every year, and just say for the whole globe, the Earth spends $1 a year on dialysis. Well, you would think at least 5%, one nickel of that dollar would go onto research and development to make sure that we could fix it. And it seems like they're so interested in all this billing out health insurance, and I just don't see a wise use of the money. Whereas when I go to Fortune 500, the great companies have, like Intel, I mean, R&D at Google and Intel. I mean, it's more serious than anything. Look at Elon Musk. I mean, NASA would spend, like $1 billion planning on a mission, and then, and Elon's like, well, I could do it for a tenth of that. And I just, we're so caught up in spending the whole bank on treating grandma, and I'd rather a lot of that money go on R&D to actually cure the damn disease.
That's true. I mean, the point is that it's in some way, every healthcare provider, the ideal situation would be for them to not require to provide their services to anybody, because everybody's so healthy, right? But then it'll be like utility companies that ask you to reduce consumption, even though they would actually want you to increase consumption. So I think that's the issue here, that yes, if we could spend more on preventive health, social changes, living healthier, as well as R&D to cure the diseases, you would probably not want to you would probably not need to spend so much on treating advanced diseases, because 80% of a person's expenditure, healthcare expenditure, happens in their last 2 to 3 years of life.
Right.
So it's a wasted expenditure to some extent.
Well, no, to a large extent, because the planet drops 385,000 babies a day. I mean, it's the most amazing species. It's the apex. It lives the 100 years like the turtle. I mean, you take every category a species wish. Well, do you want to live 3 months like an insect or 100 years like a turtle? We're 100 years like the turtle. I mean, we won every category, but they shift so much money. I mean, these babies are being born, and at birth, their first president they inherit $40,000 of debt from their grandparents on interest, and then what's the baby gift? They come by and give you a new outfit that they bought for $3. Like $3, you gave them $40,000 of debt and your some shoes. That is so wrong. I would rather be spending grandma's money on the baby, and when the baby's born, they should have a savings account, not $40,000 of debt on all this. I mean, the math is just not adding up.
That's true.
And the deficit of America. I mean, they've been adding $1 trillion a year. Both parties, you can't say it's politics. They're all doing this. And now they added $3 trillion this year. I mean, this party could come to an end.
I agree. I mean, changing topics a bit. I don't know if you've read this new book by Stephanie Kelton about modern monetary theory, which pretty much says that you don't have to worry about deficits and printing money at all. And it's like mind blowing. And there are people actually believing parts of it. So I don't know if that's the way. I guess they're only able to do that for in the short term because the US dollar is the world reserve currency. If that were not the case, we would already be seeing runaway inflation maybe.
Yeah, but when they talk about the reserve currency, they talk about like it's some holy roller thing. That's only exchanging money between two countries that trade. 99% of the money is inside a country circulating there.
Right.
So they think they're this big international currency, and it's like, I mean, there's 1,100,000,000 people in India. There's 1,300,000,000 in China. There's 1 billion people in Africa. There's 1 billion people in the Americas, and probably not even 10% of that is foreign exchange between continents. Most of the people are doing all their eating, cooking, cleaning, and baby stuff. But I want to go back to your book, which I wish my homies would read. You got to read his book. It's called Just Enough Healthcare. But I want you to go through. I mean, we know we're dentists. We know our issues. So, you talk about healthcare systems and providers, doctors. But there's health insurance and payers. There's pharmaceutical companies. There's medical billing, payment, healthcare data analytics, and then there's the government role. Pick another one besides the providers. We've been talking about providers, but how do you see the health insurance on all this?
Right. So health insurance is kind of the backbone of the American healthcare system today, because it's the third-party payer system. In fact, health insurance is, some people say it's almost socialism, because to some extent it is from each according to his ability and to each according to his need, because everybody pays the same premium, but many people do not utilize any of the care. If you're paying a $7,000 premium and another $7,000 deductible, most people don't use that much care in a year. So it's actually going to the people who are high consumers of healthcare, right? So in a way, insurance is socialism, but it's a free market solution to addressing healthcare costs and healthcare services.
So would you say, okay, so in dentistry, we say, people always talk about dental insurance, and we say there's no such thing as dental insurance, because dental insurance is an actuarial risk analysis versus moral hazard. There's 100 people in the town. They all buy car insurance. One guy wrecks the car, so everybody pays a little because they don't know who's going to wreck the car. Fire insurance on your house. Everybody pays a little, and there's only one Irish guy drinking and smoking in bed that burns his house down. But health insurance, how do you have health insurance when every single person needs health care? Everybody,
absolutely. So
everybody sees the doctor and the dentist.
Health insurance in America is not really comparable to property insurance or car insurance, because it's not just covering catastrophic care. It's covering pretty much everything that you use. So I compare it to, it's like an extended warranty on your car that covers not just repairs, but also oil changes. It's supposed to cover everything. It's like prepaid medical care. It's not really insurance, right? So that's a big difference. Thank you for pointing that out, or bringing that up, because yes, health insurance is not like car insurance. It's not like fire insurance.
And let me point out something that I want to point out something. I'm a dentist. I'm an MBA. I've been doing dentistry 32 years, but I see a lot of stuff in my own eyes. Like, when you go to the free clinics in Arizona that for dentistry, and they're all free, you go to the head dentist. Well, what's the biggest problem with your clinic? He goes, well, half the people don't even show up for their appointment. Oh, because it's free. And then you go tell a person, if everyone that came here had to pay $10 to make an appointment, and if they miss, the next appointment is $20, they start looking at you like, God, are you evil? You're just a mean person. Meanwhile, that patient who didn't show up is at Macayo's eating Mexican enchiladas and a margarita with a pack of cigarettes on her way to go buy a dime bag at the dispenser. I mean, these socialistic. Well, I'll tell you another thing. They always, like Noam Chomsky. I like listening to him. I really do. I think he's up here in Tucson. He's a great mind of just pointing out every bad thing every government ever did. And I love the I love the information, but he presents it from this theory that the 8 billion people, those were just innocent sheep. They didn't have anything to do with anything. They're hard to govern. People are challenging. Why? Because they're wild animal Homo sapiens. And for him to point out everything the governments did wrong, and just to give the people like, well, they're perfect, and all the government's bad, like, well, everybody running the government were babies from this herd, and the herd is batshit crazy. So so everything should equal, the equal sign, both sides equal. Your assets, liabilities, they equal. But a lot of the views are just like, oh, government bad, people perfect, or people bad, government perfect. I mean, there's got to be some equal thing here. If I have to pay for your $50,000 knee transplant, you should have to chip in. I mean, we're all in this tribe together, and they don't want to do that. They're just like, the people are innocent, and the government, the employer should pay everything, or, vice versa. But it's so hard to get them to realize that It's not insurance. There's no one we can spread the risk around. It's a transfer of wealth that we're just going to do. And I believe it should be there because I always check people on their, they can say something, but it didn't match up. Like if you came out of a grocery store and there's a 6-year-old kid there, and if it doesn't go to see the doctor right now and today it'll die, well, 100% would say, well, we got to get this kid to a doctor. Okay, well, then don't say you're against government umbrella health care. I mean, it's the same thing. If you saw a kid playing in the middle of the interstate, everybody be calling 911 saying, hey, there's a kid. So don't tell me about you want to defund all the police. I mean, people are calling the police, asking you to come out. Now, granted, there's some crazy police officers. Like, there's crazy everyone because we're all wild animals. I believe we're called Homo sapiens, and all the other homos are gone. Homo Neanderthal, Homo denisovanen, habilis. I mean, and I doubt they went away peacefully. I have a huge feeling that Homo sapien probably violently led to their death and demise. It's predator or prey. But I want you to talk about pharmaceuticals. What do you think of the pharmaceutical industry? My pet peeve on the pharmaceutical industry, when they spend more on marketing than they do on R&D, I already don't trust you. I mean, if you were 10% R&D, 5% marketing, I would listen to you. But they spend more on marketing than they do on R&D. So to me, it's a sham.
I wouldn't call it a complete sham, but yes, I would say that the real groundbreaking drugs and other treatments, I think it's 1 out of every 5 or 6 or 10 is really something that needs to hit the market. Because what you find if you talk to a lot of physicians, especially primary care and people who are not doing the intensivist or hospitalist stuff, they'll tell you a lot of these things that people suffer from, diabetes and hypertension, etc., can be treated with 20-year-old drugs. So in a way, the pharmaceutical industry, yes, is kind of inventing a need for the newest drug, which may or may not be significantly better than something that was out there. And that's why they need to market it. They need to say that it's so much better than anything that was available before. And so, yes, that becomes a problem with a free market system to some extent, because what you're saying is if you create a product, you have to make sure somebody buys it, somebody wants it. And so you have to market it, you have to advertise it, you have to sell it. And you have to create a need for it. To some extent, also you have to create a differentiated diagnosis for it sometimes even.
Yeah, and I want to have a big shout out to Dr. Maurice Ralph Hillman, whose birthday is the day after mine. My birthday is August 29th, his August 30th. He was born August 30th, 1919, died April 11, 2005, who developed 8 of the 14 vaccines routinely scheduled for measles, mumps, hepatitis A, hepatitis B, chickenpox, meningitis, pneumonia, and Haemophilus influenza. And he single-handedly has saved more lives than anybody known. I mean, what would be the opposite of him? Mao Zedong, Idi Amin, Stalin, Hitler. I mean, this is the guy. And to think that his life's work, I mean, one of the greatest men, and no one will even say his name because the anti-vaxxers, they'd probably rather bring back Mao and Idi Amin and Stalin and Hitler before they'd want to bring back Maurice Hillman. I mean, could you imagine your life's work being mocked by people who don't even know the difference between geometry and trig? I mean, what a weird case we're in right now.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. And see, the thing with what he did is that he helped so many people, right? Now, today, you take a drug like Remicade, which is used for ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, rheumatoid arthritis, etc. It's a game changer. But the number of people who have that condition is not that many. You compare it to finding something that really works well for diabetes, hypertension, or heart disease, or some of the common cancers. That, and what Dr. Holman did is way more than that. He pretty much did away with a bunch of infectious diseases that were terrorizing the population. So yes, that's the kind of medicine we would want. That's the kind of healthcare we would like to have. But right now, because of various things in motion in the economy and in the populace, personal responsibility is down. You have diseases of lifestyle. And so you're kind of getting into a system of consumption and fear and consumption again. And that includes drugs and healthcare.
One of the things I'm always disappointed with dental insurance companies, like in my backyard, like I've been dealing with Delta Dental of Arizona for 32 years, and you talk about the cost. Well, it's their digital information is so bad that a lot of times people came to the appointment, but they didn't have their insurance forms. They got to reschedule, drive back to Intel, Motorola, go to HR, cut down a tree, make a piece of paper, and you're like, why isn't this an app? I for 32 years, I've had to have a full-time employee. Now, I love Kalani, but she has to physically call each one of those deals and it's so crazy. Like Obamacare tried to do this big reform, that Biden was his vice president. And they knew that 30% of the cost of healthcare is just paperwork.
Yeah.
I mean, we got fintech, we got apps. I mean, I look at what I can do on my app, and I mean, the low-hanging fruit, we wouldn't even have to talk about whether or not you can have the surgery. We could save a third of the bill if you just automated that. Is that what you're seeing? I mean, you're the healthcare informatics guy on Spades. What do you see? All the waste and confusion and overlap that could be easily fixed? And
it's actually one of the causes. System? It's one of the huge causes of what is known as physician burnout. Because the paperwork and like a simple thing, there's something called prior authorization. So there's a bunch of drugs or procedures for which the physician's office has to actually get pre-approved by the health insurance company before they administer the drug or the treatment to the patient. And I find it so hard to believe that even now, very few health insurance companies have a streamlined system for prior authorization. It's just phones, it's delays, it's so much.
Because it shows their soul, their heart and soul is they want to sell the premium and not pay any claims. For instance, if you look at health insurance, you look at dentistry. Everything they're doing is trying to deny a claim. I'm asking, well, what are you doing to improve the quality? I mean, do you show the consumer that, okay, there's 1,000 people in Arizona that do root canals, and this guy only loses 5 out of 10, fail in 5 years. This guy loses 25 out of 50. Did you asked his name and he's eligible? Did you ask what implant I put in there? I mean, some knee transplants and hip transplants failed a lot in dentistry. We saw this. Some of these implant systems for TMJ, some of the disastrous things, they never cared about anything like that. They didn't want to track what materials we're using, anything to increase quality control. It's just money, honey. We sold the premium and we don't want to pay the claim, and our CEO wants to make $1 million a year, and they just do enough for show. In fact, instead of R&D and improving this stuff, they'd rather do a PR campaign for their image than do so. I mean, I just don't see the data where Medicare, Medicaid, and every dental insurance company from Blue Cross, United, to any of them are doing anything other than to make more profit and not pay the premium, as opposed to doing something with all that data to where it's going to be a better system, improve the quality.
Yes, in health insurance, they have started doing quality reporting on providers and physicians, but the sad part is very few members and patients look at that stuff before they go to a physician so it pretty much becomes useless. And Obamacare did address one part of it, that there's something called a medical loss ratio, and there's a floor on it of 80%, which means that out of, if you collect $1 billion in premiums, you have to pay out 800 million in claims to providers. Otherwise, you have to send it back out as rebates to members. So in some ways, yes, there has been a limit to how much claim denial and other things have happened because of something like Obamacare. On the other hand, yes, the issue is that there's nobody out there who's trying to improve quality and reduce costs at the same time. There's this thing called the triple aim in healthcare, which is a concept that was devised by the Institute for Healthcare Improvement. And it says that the aim of a healthcare system should be three things. One would be lowering the cost of care. The second would be the improving the health of the population. And the third would be improving patient satisfaction in terms of quality or patient experience of care in terms of quality, satisfaction, and access. So I'd say the Affordable Care Act.
Okay, the three things were the aim of a healthcare system would be to, 1, lower the cost, 2, improve the health of the population, and 3 was what?
It's improve the patient experience, which is a combination of quality, satisfaction, and access. As in, do you have access to healthcare? Right. So it's the third one is made up of kind of three parts.
And what was the three things? The third thing was improve the patient experience with access,
quality, and satisfaction. Right. So Obamacare did address access. It did reduce the number of people on the rolls of the uninsured, right? Or increase the number of people on the insured rolls. However, we have pretty much not done much to do anything to the cost of care or improve the health of populations. So we have a long way to go. Yeah.
First of all, I want to point out that a lot of these issues that I'm talking about, I mean, I could go either way because, I mean, look at one of the deals of healthcare, which the other side of it. Like, people say, well, we spend 17% on healthcare. Well, that means 17 cents of every dollar spent on healthcare. If we cut that down to 7%, do you realize that 10 out of 100 people in healthcare are now unemployed? Yeah. And when those people are redeployed to make an iPhone, my Diet Coke, whatever the hell I'm buying, I mean, they're humans. They're going to spend all their money and all they can borrow. Because you got macroeconomic data. Every democracy is like getting rid of the teacher. And they say, well, we're going to get rid of the teacher. Okay, we're going to vote. You want to study math? Or go on to recess. We're going to recess. Do you want to, and the cafeteria, do you want to eat broccoli or ice cream? Ice cream. And America is the ice cream country of the world. They're not going to eat their broccoli. They're not going to learn math. That's the system. And I don't care because they're all going to die anyway. What I care most about is the species. And then when you look at the fact that They give birth to 385,000 babies a day. I mean, for anybody to say anything's wrong with healthcare on the planet, I mean, what do you think the giraffes are saying and the zebras are saying when they hear you say something like that? They're like, dude, are you kidding me? I'm a zebra. How the hell? What's wrong with you guys? So the humans are just they're beating every expectation known to man. And those people, if they weren't spending 17% on healthcare, they'd be spending 17% on Starbucks, coffee, chocolate, all that kind of stuff. But I, as a businessman, I just think it's I'm just wired to where everything could be done faster, easier, higher quality, lower costs, and make it smaller. And Obamacare, you can tell these guys never own their own business because, again, I lived through it in Arizona. Every time someone would badmouth Obamacare, within 4 seconds, I could figure out they were using it. I say, well, what insurance did you use when you had your baby? Oh, I have Access. Okay, well, there's 50 different states, and they all call their Medicaid something differently. So most of the people benefiting from Obamacare, had no idea. Same with the providers. I was blown away that you could have 8 years of college, be a doctor of dental surgery, and not know that you're a pediatrician and all these pediatric patients paid by Access, that's Obamacare, and then when you cut those things, so it was a branding problem. I mean, they just call this Coke. They don't call it 50 different things for 50 different states. And that's why I like Medicare for All better than Obamacare Medicaid for any other reason, just for branding. Right. They all know grandma has Medicare and loves it. So the children don't name it 50 different things. It was the worst branding IPO launch I'd ever seen in my life. I mean, they couldn't have launched a worse branded IPO in the history of government. I mean, it was just complete amateurism. And again, but anyway, so I'm trying to, what was the other thing on their book I wanted to talk about? We talked about the medical billing, payment, healthcare data and analytics. What do you see in the healthcare data analytics? I mean, you've been looking at this stuff for a long time. You also used to work at Z Omega, right, as a chief analytics officer. I mean, a huge, huge company with Sam Rangsaway. And your friend, I noticed you wrote the review on his book, Pallav Sharda. He works for Google Healthcare. What do you think your friend, Pallav, what do you think Google's going to do with all that healthcare data? They got 23andMe. They got an entire healthcare. It's www.healthcare.google.com. Very interesting what they're doing with the data. What do you think of healthcare.google?
So Google tried to get into healthcare a few years back with Google Health. And they didn't make much of an inroad there because they went about it the wrong way. Now they are doing it in a different way, as are other companies like IBM and Microsoft, that they are partnering a lot with health systems and providers and even insurance companies to get access to the data. Now, that does leave or bring up some privacy concerns because sometimes the data is being accessed without the patient not knowing that their data is being used. I mean, it might be de-identified data, but it's still data at an aggregate level about people that you're studying. However, there is a hope that you might be able to find patterns of disease. You will be able to find patterns of treatment, and you would be able to do what is known as personalized healthcare, where you target the treatment to the person in whom it is likely to work the best. And that's the future of healthcare, I think, within the next 5 to 10 years, with people like Elon Musk and the Google guys and Microsoft and Amazon and Walmart also entering healthcare. So there's going to be a shakeup. The reason why it's difficult for a lot of these innovators to do big change in healthcare in a snap is because it's a highly regulated industry. So once the regulatory pressures go down a bit, I think innovation in healthcare can happen much faster.
Well, that's the 5,000-year playbook of government. They create a big problem, and then all the people need them to solve it. And when people go to the government to help them, it's like, okay, this is all the problem they created. I mean, they can do, it's like a 4-year-old child. They can do no wrong. They can go outside and whatever they do, they can do no wrong. One of my best friends, when he was 2, started a fire in his closet, burned the entire house down. And his mom actually now thinks it's funny. They just can't do anything wrong. The government, they ruin everything. Go back to the HIPAA. Go back to HIPAA. So, it's not a business like you said with Google. So they started healthcare, and they went and they found out after they went in there the first time that they did it wrong. So they pivot, they come back, and they re-enter a different way. Look at HIPAA. It's like they spend 5 years writing a monster document, then it passes one time, and then remember, dot your I's and cross your T's came from the king would write a writ, W-R-I-T, and people were getting hung and killed, and the king didn't apply that. And they always say, king, dot your I's, cross your T's, because you said it so vague. All these people that you weren't talking about, and HIPAA. I mean, it's not like a business to where as data comes in, they modify, they change, they adapt. It's like they'll just pass this one big colossal nightmare, and then over the next 20, 30 years, what does it do? Drives up costs. I mean, look at the government with the EU about website deal. So now the government's idea about cleaning up the websites. Now, every damn website I go to for the rest of my life, I have to accept the cookies. Thank you, government. God, what was your next best idea, you dumbass? I mean, and having to approve the cookies is just like HIPAA. It's like they try to do something, and over the next decade, it's far worse than if they would have done nothing at all. And so then what will they do? They'll come out with another one. I seriously think HIPAA should just be abandoned, just completely erased.
I think, yeah, to some extent, there's really no expectation of privacy in the modern world. So,
well, there is privacy. You know where the privacy is? The government, the 18 secret, they have all your knowledge. Facebook, Google, and Amazon have all your knowledge. Facebook's obviously selling it to, so all the communist countries of Putin and North Korea and China and our government, there's no privacy. They know everything about us. You know who's private? Us. We don't see what they're seeing because of their own laws. So all privacy, so we have privacy against what everyone else already knows about us. And that should be reversed. And I think the cell phone is the answer. I really think that when Steve Jobs stuck my music, my phone, a touch screen, and the internet all into one, it was the first time the human even had a platform where someday he could have access to the same data that the big insurance, the big government, the big everyone could have. So I think this is the equalizer, and I think from 2007 to 2107 will be Sapiens' finest year. Not that they haven't had a finest year in the last million years, killing anybody and anything in their way, but I'm really excited about the smartphone to finally even the playing field from the individual to the HOA that you have to live under.
Yeah, no, a few points so some of the few things that have been done by government in the last year or two are not that bad. One is like the price transparency initiative.
Yeah.
Right? Because opening up these contracts and making hospitals and insurance companies reveal actually what they are paying for these procedures and treatments. I think that's a good plan now.
But transparency, everybody said be transparent. Historians, government, military. When people are opaque, that's where all the trouble. I mean, so nobody could disagree with transparency, but it's funny how you had to start it out saying, well, there is one thing the government did that wasn't quite really that bad. I mean, that's how a compliment starts with the government. Well, of all the horrendous things he did, here's one thing that wasn't quite so tremendous. But yeah, transparency. And there's no transparency in prices. You don't realize when you go to the doctor that you're getting a filling done. Here's the worst thing in dentistry. So the average dental office takes 6 to 12 PPO plans. So a standard filling, the doctor might be getting paid from 100 to 180. But if you go in there in cash, you're the highest payer. Like if you go in and you have no insurance, you buy a crown, $1,000. But then all the 18 insurance companies you work with, it's around $600. So, and then the doctor says, well, I hate insurance companies. I wish it was all the cash market. You penalize the cash people. They pay the highest. The way to get more cash patients is give them the volume discount that you're giving all the PPOs. And exactly. Every one of these dentists, if they gave the cash patient what they were given the PPOs on the volume discount, it'd be a game changer.
I address this. It's similar in healthcare, similar to dentistry, similar in medicine rather. So I address this in a chapter where I explain what a charge master is and how to read your explanation of benefits that you get at home. And because most people, they read it, they don't understand it, where the charged amount is 3 times the allowed amount, and then the paid amount is way less, and then you're being asked to pay something, a deductible, a copay. So I explain that very simply in the book. because I really think that these are things that everybody should understand, because we are getting these EOBs, these medical bills at home, and we're paying for them. But if we don't understand how this works, then how are we ever going to make the change or demand the change that makes it better?
I'll end on this. We went over an hour. You're way too important and a busy guy to go overtime with me. But, there's a couple things I'll never forget. One was when they started, Kennedy started, Johnson, the war on poverty, and eventually John F. Kennedy was working on it, but he got assassinated. And it was Lyndon B. Johnson who passed Medicaid and Medicare. And I can remember all the old people, all the wise men saying, oh, my God, the doctors just got in bed with the government. And if you get in bed with anybody, you're going to get screwed. This is going to turn out really bad. And from 62, that was the year I was born, to this day, it just seems like it's just become a colossal craziness. And then the other thing was, the other side of that was Milton Friedman in Free to Choose. And he said that, his clarity test, because people just say crazy things they don't believe. But he said, here's the clarity test in healthcare. You're going to die tonight of a disease. And I got a blue pill. And if you take it, you won't die tonight. So how much will you give me for that pill? And, well, obviously you give me your house, your car, your savings, your phone. You give them everything. But what's weird is no one ever talks about housing like they do healthcare. No one talks about cars like they do healthcare. Personal finance is the funniest thing. You talk about personal finance being emotional. I've never heard anybody talk about personal finance that even talked about personal finance. The number one cause of divorce is getting married, and if you never get married, you're never going to get divorced. And if you never have a kid, you're never going to have to pay for their college. If you stay single and have no kids, that's financial planning. And then what do? You want to go out and get married and have 3 kids and whatever. So end of financial planning. But again, I'm gonna end this seminar like I started it, or this podcast when I started it, is Americans won't talk about healthcare in the same ways they talk about houses, cars, restaurants, Yelp reviews, whatever. Man, when they talk about healthcare, it's just like religion and politics. They already have their belief system, and I understand that the best, because my 2 oldest sisters are Catholic nuns. I mean, do you think you could write a book and change them into Hindus? What do you think the chances you could write a book and convert them to Hindus?
Probably less than none.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna go on a date tonight with a unicorn who shows up on a mermaid before they would change their religious views. So it just is what it is, and I don't care, because I think the species is number one. I mean, it's unstoppable. In fact, I would go this far. As much as I hate the government, short of some crazy nuclear war, I don't even think the government could slow down Homo sapien. I mean, when you're dropping 385,000 babies a day, oh my God, every sea lion saying, are you kidding me? I mean, we're unstoppable. So I don't care what anybody says or does with government and healthcare, whatever, we're still the apex species. And I don't think anything's going to stop us unless it's some exploding star or supernova or something, So I'm optimistic.
So am I.
Hey, thank you so much for coming on the show, Siv. I mean, I could talk to you for 40 days and 40 nights. Thank you so much for talking to all these dentists about the world of informatics. It was very, very fun having you on the show. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
All right.
Good
Have
night.
a great day, buddy.
Night.